Is Peggy Brekveld, who's Brekveld, is that how it's said? Okay, who's agreed to come and moderate this panel on very short notice, and she is the president of the Thunder Bay Federation of Agriculture, and so I'll hand it over to her.
Good afternoon. I'm very thankful to be here today, and as a representative of the Thunder Bay Federation of Agriculture, it's great to be included in a talk about the green economy. And wonderfully, we just had lunch, so nobody will be drooling as we talk about the great things of food that we grow here in Northern Ontario. I thought I'd just start out with a few statistics from Northern Ontario and from Thunder Bay to show you that it is a relevant part of our economy here. In the Northern Ontario region, there are 2,479 farms in the Northern Ontario area, which is a very big district. It's huge. But just in Thunder Bay, there are 252 farms, and there are 375 operators. We gross $32 million of income. And compared to forestry and mining, we're often considered very small. But when you're in forestry and mining, you tend to see that cyclical type of economics. Farming tends to be this slow diesel engine, and it tends to sit down at the bottom, but slowly but surely grow. And I think that's what we like to focus on today, is the potential for growth in the food sector here in the north. So without further ado, we have three excellent panelists. The first one who's going to speak is Joseph Leblanc. Then we have Renata Thiboutot and Gigi Veeraraghavan. Okay. We're going to let them each do their presentation. We'll have time for about 2 questions for that particular panelist, and then the next one will start. When all 3 have completed, then we'll go and open the floor to questions to all or one of the panelists in particular. So, Joseph Leblanc has been engaging in food security issues for the past 5 years, and I've known him and been involved with some of the projects he's done, and I'm quite impressed. In this time, he has worked with a number of First Nations communities throughout Northern Ontario on projects dealing with a broad range of food issues, including forest food contamination, non-timber forest product development and marketing, and forest food system mapping. He holds an Honours Bachelor of Environmental Studies in Forest Conservation and is currently a PhD candidate in Forest Sciences at Lakehead University, conducting community-based research pertaining to Aboriginal perspectives of food security and natural resource management. He was born and raised in Northern Ontario, where he now lives with his wife Serena and their 2 young children. And he is also a founding board member and chair of True North Community Cooperative, and I think that's what you're going to talk about most today, right? So please welcome Joseph Leblanc.
Thanks, Peggy. Where's that clicker? All right, so I'm going to talk about True North Community Co-op today. For some, this is probably a repeat. Just did a quick head count, and there's about 15 members here, so about half the room. So yeah, but some of it might be new. So just quickly, what is a co-op, and what we're doing at True North, and some examples of this in practice. So it's an autonomous association of persons united voluntarily to meet their common economic, social, and cultural needs. Based on the values of self-help, self-responsibility, democracy, equality, equity, and solidarity. So co-ops are primarily controlled by their board of directors, who's elected by and from the membership. Derive equity from member owners. Okay? So as co-op members, everyone shares ownership. There's not a private enterprise or a single person. Operate for the benefit of member owners. True North is unique in that approach, is that we're not a consumer-based co-op or a producer-based co-op, as we have multiple levels of membership, and in that serve those members in unique ways. Co-ops may share earnings with members based on their use. The Thunder Bay Farm Co-op is an example of that. We're not a shareholder co-op, so we don't pay back dividends. And they have perpetual existence, so hopefully in 100 years from now, someone else will be talking about that. 7 co-op principles that all co-ops have to follow: international principles, voluntary and open membership, democratic member control, member economic participation, autonomy and independence, education, training, and information, cooperation among cooperatives, and that can take different forms. We work with local subREA as one example, share knowledge, information. We helping others to start their own co-ops, and maybe Gigi will talk a little bit about that, and concern for community. So basically the difference is that they're user-owned, user-controlled, and for the benefit of the users. So TNCC was founded in November 2009. We opened our shared storefront on Bay Street last June, June 2010. We became a Southern supplier in the Nutrition North program in 2011. We're the only nonprofit supplier in that program. That's the old food mail program, federal government subsidy for shipping food to certain remote First Nations. And so we were very happy to get that, and taken a unique approach to that the funder seems to be really happy with. So we currently have 361 members, 51 producers from throughout Northern Ontario, and 8 commercial organizational members. So just to share a little bit of the background and how we're structured. The vision for True North is community resilience in Northern Ontario, feeding into the green economy discussion today. What we're really talking about is diversification of our economy and being responsive to change. Background stuff. Individual memberships are $15 a year. Producers is $25. You have to be a producer to sell through True North. And commercial organizational memberships are $40 annually. You save 5% off all your purchases. You get a vote at the AGM and an opportunity to run for the board. So producer members and commercial organizational members have a voting person identified, and that individual can run for the board. And producers are able to sell their products. So based on 3 guiding principles, community strength, true value, and accessibility and availability, I'll go into detail a little bit into each of these. So with the aim of strengthening a sense of togetherness amongst communities in Northern Ontario, to achieve strong and meaningful connections among neighbors and our local environment. So we're working to sort of diversify and strengthen local economies, encourage sustainable food production and resource use, including forest foods, fiber, and other goods. So I'll talk a little bit about some of the non-timber forest product producers and how the co-op helps us market those. Some activities. The Youth Blueberry Initiative in the Airland First Nation is run by youth volunteers, and they basically raise money for youth initiatives. They took a trip, bus load down to Canada's Wonderland this weekend, and it's all blueberry money. Our grand opening and some activities in Port Albany First Nation. So the true value principle is based on producers setting their own prices. When we were doing our sort of initial community discussions, a lot of the producers shared concerns over selling stuff to a third party that would then mark it up without their control, or say, this is what we're paying for onions, take it or leave it, and sometimes they have to leave it because it wasn't worth it. So our producers set their own prices with a stable structure that sustains the operations and allows it to be viable for them. Accessibility and availability. It's not good enough to just exist in Thunder Bay if you can't be accessed by regional people, and so we're doing our best to do that, and through partnerships and personal relationships it's becoming easier, but it's definitely a huge challenge. As you know, the region is very diverse, east to west and especially north to south, and so trying to work on distribution networks and something that makes sense financially to get to remote First Nations, as well as something that makes sense for farmers to sell their products and forest food producers. So some examples of this in practice. Highlight the non-timber forest product marketing, cooperative marketing activities, and the business clustering that's happening. CSA is flying to 7 remote First Nations in the picture on the left there. So for non-timber forest products, just like all producers, but it's particularly important in this structure, is a fair, equitable trade with producers who control and set their own prices. For those of us that pick blueberries and know, sometimes they're not where they were last year, and sometimes things happen. MNR sprays that place, or a road is closed, or a fire comes through, and you have to change, and the valuation can change from year to year. And so with that pricing structure in mind, producers are able to say, this is what I need to get this year, and they're able to sell it through that structure. We help with regional distribution and value-added production. We'll pay 10% of the shipping to get stuff to members. Members share some distribution costs though. And we work with secondary producers to get things like blueberries into their products. So Boreal Forest Teas is one example of that. She harvests a lot of wild plants herself, but we're able to connect her with blueberry producers and Moosomin, which will be in a new tea coming up, but as a source for secondary producers to access primary non-timber forest products. So five producers that sell raw NTFPs through the co-op. There's a number of others that are using those in baking, teas, and other things. Cooperative Community Supported Agriculture Program is one of the initiatives that falls under the cooperative marketing heading. So this summer, 9 producer members cooperatively offered CSA, which is Community Supported Agriculture. So share members would pay ahead of the season and pick up their food regularly throughout. There were 43 shares, 17 of which were in Thunder Bay and 26 in 7 remote First Nations. So over the summer we had bi-weekly delivery, as close to bi-weekly as we could. You know, weather changes some things, and you can't land somewhere and it sits in, so look out for a bit. But for the most part, we had it worked out pretty good, and next year it'll be better. Business clustering is something that kind of fell out naturally. Each commercial organizational member has a unique relationship with the NCC. They may not work with each other, but they're certainly working with the co-op as an entity. Our commercial and organizational members are listed there. Several restaurants in town. Some of these memberships are supportive and cross-promotional. So Bonobos is one example, which is a vegan restaurant and grocery store. Some things we don't have, we send people to them, and some things they don't have, they send people to us. We both started our stores about a month apart from each other, so helping to learn and work through some kinks together. Bean Fiend is a coffee shop that sources a lot of stuff through us. Made Fresh is a breakfast and lunch place opening this fall, and she's sourced a lot of products through the co-op, so she's got a whole lot of blueberries stored aside and other things that will be available through there. And cooperatively sourcing regional products. So we have made an exemption from the requirement to be a member for dairy and poultry products because of some of the regulations that exist, and it's not likely that they're going to join anytime soon, because usually they're very large producers. And so we source cheese out of Thornlow as a cooperative, and commercial members are able to bulk buy with us as well. And shared space and marketing, primarily the greenhouse. We share a storefront on Bay Street, share costs and build capacity that way, as well as marketing at the same time. So we're located at 279 Bay Street. There's some membership forms over there for the other half of you. And the website is being populated right now, so you can check that out and find the email address there and links to the Facebook group and some other things that are happening. Yeah. Sure, yeah.
For people that don't have internet, how can they be contacted when the event is happening?
Well, we have our chalkboard in the store. We have trying to keep the events posted on there and as up to date as possible with the pre-orders and other things. So coming in, but again, in that being accessible, right? Like we have a lot of members that aren't using internet or that are, you know, so we need to adapt and be accessible as well as being there. So sending an email out to say this is the pre-order doesn't reach everyone, and so we're trying our best to make sure that we can. Being a volunteer board, we can't exactly call everyone, but if you check in regularly, and you can always call and ask if there's something available, check it out that way. No problem.
Yeah, go ahead, you can ask your question. Yeah. One more, yeah.
I know that you're a young organization, you've already done a lot around but like you were talking about the region, Northern Ontario as a whole, as a state, or Eastern Ontario, Thunder Bay sometimes it's hard to think about something about this now. What's the strategy that we have in the future in terms of having those connections and ensuring that we can have kind of a consistent for Northern Ontario that's well connected and well sourced?
Yeah.
Joseph, before you answer that, maybe part of our question would be, could you maybe describe some of the variety of things that you have at the co-op?
Sure, yeah. Pretty well, and most meats you can imagine. So we have pork and beef, veal, sheep, bison, boar, and a lot of grain products, so rolled oats and different flour and stuff like that. Pretty well all vegetables you can grow, teas, crafts. We have jewelers and photographers and who make mint and things like this, and it's quite diverse. We're not a food co-op. We sell anything that people will produce with their lands and their hands. So something you're wild harvesting or something you're crafting or whatever it is, you can sell it through there as long as you pay the $25 membership fee. But yeah, there's definitely a need to understand distribution networks a lot better. Speaking as one of the smaller suppliers in Nutrition North, that program really does benefit the very large corporations that are able to have the volume to move and get better rates and have established distribution routes. Thunder Bay wasn't a distribution point in the food mail program, which put us in a position of having to find someone who was willing to build the capacity to ship food from here. The old program prescribed distribution points, and the one for Northwestern Ontario was Winnipeg, and so most of the stuff comes out of there. From the east it was Timmins, and so we needed to sort of do a lot of groundwork as well as starting the participation in that program. But yeah, I think working out community-based solutions, like what we can work out to get things to Hearst, will be between the work that we put into it, right? And because that's where we'll build. Because right now we have to build from the ground up. There isn't much in the way of an established route there.
We can take one more, and then we'll move to the next
I was
one.
just going to say, there was a co-op store where my aunt worked, without those, and it kind of finally fell apart. Are you familiar with that, or do you know about how that, in that area that it's green, or you connected with them?
The People's Cooperative, you mean?
Yeah.
Yeah, we've heard a lot about what was going on there and what happened. We're in a different sort of economic climate than that was maybe 25 years ago or
Quite a
so.
few years
Yeah,
ago.
that it went under.
Yeah, because my aunt was the bookkeeper there at one time, but I was just young then.
Yeah, and it had a lot to do with, I think, this globalization that we've all sort of come to learn the problems with. Large companies moving in, and it's really, I think, a different economic climate. The old co-ops, the literature around co-ops speaks of two generations, right? The first generations were really about personal choice in response to the green revolution and what was happening in agriculture, and so it was very much about, we want to source organic for our own bodies or our children. The second generation is really about social justice and changing economic structures that are been imposed on regions.
Our second panelist will be Renata Thiboutot. She is the owner of the family-run Mile Hill Farms, located in Gillies, Ontario. And actually, I started as, like, up till I was 7, I lived in Gillies, so. She produces beef, pork, and produce, a lot of vegetables. Mile Hill Farms has embraced sustainable farming practices with a focus on being self-sufficient and maintaining healthy soil quality, animal happiness, and health. Their animals are raised on mixed and locally grown grains and organic hay and pasture. Renata has been a member of a number of local food initiatives in the Thunder Bay area, including a producer member of Slow Food Superior, the True North Community Co-op, and the Thunder Bay Country Market. Please welcome Renata Thiboutot. Hello. This is the first time I've spoken in a long time. Peggy thinks I've spoken more recently, but I think it's been about 7 or 8 years. I guess I have to wait till the end to ask questions. Two of the things that I wanted to talk about today were how we've addressed sustainability on our farm, and also the challenges of making a living as a farmer. On our farm, we've really focused on having a closed circle, and that means focusing on producing our own feed for our animals and raising our animals that we're going to eat and share with our community, and taking the organic matter that animals produce or our crops produce and use that to amend the soil to keep it healthy and full of organic matter and good nutrients. Some of the So some of the things we've done around that is to do green manures, which is something that a farm does not, unless you have a pile of animals, you will not be able to produce enough manure for your fields to produce enough feed for those animals to put organic matter in. So you need to find other ways of doing that. One of the ways is by using a green manure, which is you plant a really good nitrogen fixing plant like a legume, clover and alfalfa, and you let that come up to just about flower, you cut it and you turn it back into the soil and let that rot, and then the next year you get a fantastic soil. It breaks apart any hard lumps in your soil and it puts a lot of nutrients back into the soil. And me coming from a really hard pack clay soil where it's a little bit like broken cement when you turn it, it's done wonders. It's amazing to see the difference. When you can't even break apart the lumps in August one year, the next year you can stick your finger right in through the soil in August when it's dry out. So clay holds water really well, which is great for us because we don't like to do a lot of watering of our gardens, and just because there will be times where you don't get rain for a month, like this last August to early September. Thank goodness it rained.
I don't know if everybody has their crops off yet, though. Something else I do too, especially in the gardens, is I make sure I start everything from seed, which includes onions, which is one of the things I love to grow. When you bring in an onion set, you're bringing in a started onion that's been stopped, and then you stick it in your garden and it restarts again. And there's nothing wrong with that. You get a great little onion from it. But if I'm taking it from one farm and bring it to my farm, any little microbes or funguses or little bugs that might be in that onion set, I'm introducing it to my farm. And because I don't want to use any insecticides or herbicides, and I want to maintain not doing that, I need to do things as pure as I can. It was completely by accident that I did that, and it's worked out really well, because I've had a lot of people turn around and say, oh, you don't have any little worms in your onions or little bugs in your onions. And I said, well, no, I didn't realize they were a problem. And I started doing that because I'm cheap. I didn't want to bring in organic onion sets from somewhere else, because it's really expensive to ship in a 50-pound bag of onion sets, where I can get a bag of 3,000 seeds shipped in for $5, right? So, and then I can just start them in my under grow lights in my basement, or I can get a greenhouse in town to start them for me. And that's that. We're very specific about the kind of seed we use on our farm. Sometimes in town that's been a little bit hard, especially for field seed. It's easy to buy garden seed and have it shipped in from small organic farms in Canada, or to bring in seed in for gardens, or to save your own seeds. There's quite a few that are very easy to save. But for our field crops, it's been a bit different. And my husband, being him, it doesn't faze him. He just goes, okay, well, I'll just go to Manitoba or Saskatchewan, Alberta, and get it shipped in from an organic supplier if the local farms can't bring it in. And one of the things that you can do, being organic, if you can't bring in certified organic seed, or you can't find it, you can use an untreated common seed, which works out fine for oats, because sometimes it's ridiculous to bring in oats from Manitoba if it's going to cost you, $1,000 to ship it in, and you could buy it in town here, untreated seed that the farmer down the road has been producing for 30 years or 40 years on his farm anyways. You just have to get it cleaned before you use it. There's a large number of really great farms in Thunder Bay, and we're really lucky to have them. My husband and I have been able to turn to Peggy and different of her family members and other farmers all over Thunder Bay whenever we've had questions or concerns, or when we needed to, you just have no idea why something's happening. You can turn around and say, what on earth is going on? And they just look at it and go, oh, well, it's this. Don't you know, you just have to do this simple little thing over here, and it's looked after, whether it be with animal health or something going on in your field crop or otherwise. And something else we've done to try and keep the balance on our farm is not introducing herbicides and pesticides. Often once you've introduced them, you throw off the bug life, the natural bug life going on around your farm, or fungal life. And once that's thrown off, then all of a sudden you're going to get infestation of something else. So we were lucky in that we walked into an old farm that had not been farmed since the 80s. And there was very natural bug life and amphibian life all over the place. We also make a point of growing things that are that grow well here. We don't try and grow things that are going to need extra inputs or need extra growing time, that are going to take a lot of extra energy to grow. There's some things, tomatoes are one of those things that you got to have a nice short season tomato to grow it in Thunder Bay. And I have a lot of green tomatoes that are ripening off the vine right now, but there's no other option here unless you have a nice big greenhouse to let them ripen in. So we do a lot of crop rotations to maintain the soil health, and we also do that to keep a rein on insects and diseases. So by planting different crops need different nutrients from the soil. So if you have an alfalfa field for 5 or 7 years, you'll go and move another grain crop through there, and that'll help to balance back out. I've lost what I'm trying to say. My husband does all the field work, I do the garden, so I should stick with that. by moving the things around in the garden, I stop pests, right? If I have tomato plants in one area and I go and throw the potatoes in there right afterwards the next year, the potato beetles like tomatoes and potatoes. So that's not a good idea to do that. They're both feeding on the same kind of thing as far as the soil. So you'll plant something that's a low feeder from the soil that keeps pests away, like an onion, and bring something else in there the following year that might be more interested in bringing in bugs, like a cabbage. And I think I already talked about green manures, but they're really a fantastic thing. Something like a clover or alfalfa plant takes nitrogen out of the air and puts it down into the ground. Other crops pull up something like phosphorus, which is becoming really somewhat depleted worldwide, and it's making it more available. If you can have it pull it up from down low in the ground, I get a really long taproot plant in there, and it'll pull it up, and you turn that in, and then that plant is going to help to feed the soil. And then moving on to making a living as a farmer. Peggy's surviving off her farm, which is great. We haven't got to that point yet. My husband still works. This year he's been working full-time off the farm. Every other year he has taken summers off, but it's with financial strain. And there's a lot of budgeting that goes on, and a lot of financial planning goes into each year as to how we're gonna put out all the money in the front when it's not gonna be coming in until the fall, right? You have to continually, as a farmer, that's one of the continual budgets. You don't have a weekly income coming in or a monthly income coming in, unless you're Peggy. And she's a dairy farmer. So anyways, but that's one of the benefits of having a big, large body. There's a marketing name for that board, the marketing board. Anyways, for us, that's one of a big challenge for us, because we've continually got to manage that in and out of the farm with the money coming in and out to make sure it's balancing and working out in our favor at the end of the year. You need to be good at a lot of trades as a farmer. You need to be good at welding, carpentry, small and large engines. You need to be good at bookwork and at understand accounting or looking at a set of books, and you need to be able to have good be able to maintain customer relations, and understand the basic running of a business, because it's not just a farm. Like, you've got to understand the whole how to grow things. You've also got to understand how to sell them too, right? A lot of farmers out west are dealing with that if they're going to keep going with the grain board or not, and that's a huge, huge change. There's also another thing that you've got to maintain your knowledge on is protocols for animal health, for carcass handling, vegetable washing, maintaining your water quality on your farm as a whole. If you're draining dirty water off your farm into your neighbor's river system, that's just not acceptable. You need to make sure all of your practices are keeping the farms around you clean also, and your neighbors' areas clean. It doesn't count for if you have smelly animals and your neighbors don't like it. I think when we first started farming, my husband and I grew up with horses, which is a little bit of a different area of farming than when you're actually producing grains and foods. And my husband grew up in town. He was a city boy, and he decided to cut hay one year, and it's just kept growing from there. One of the best advice he ever got from another farmer who was scared about planting his first field crop was just to put the seed in the ground and let it grow. So, but it is a scary, it's quite a huge endeavor, taking up farming, and it's taken over our whole lives. And I think that's one of the challenges too, is to know where you say, okay, you know what, I know this has to get done, but we have to go for a swim. We have to go escape the farm for a little bit and relax for a bit. And it's really, really hard when you've got, a pile of cows sitting there looking at you saying, but we really wanted to get moved onto new pasture today. We don't want to wait for tomorrow. Or you've got a crop that needs to get planted for harvesting, so you don't miss out on a harvest date. And it's hard to do that. And it's hard to walk away from a sunny day when the hay could get cut and you know that there's 3 more days of sun and your hay's going to dry properly and you're not going to end up with moldy hay because, you know, because of rain coming. So I think that's a really big challenge as a farmer too, is to maintain a lifestyle. You have to learn how to give up control because you are at the mercy of the weather and the seasons, and you have to do your best and pick your best crops that you possibly can to for our area. Don't read books that pertain to farming in California. I expect it's going to work here. And I think that was, I laugh about that. When I was 20, I read a book on dairy and how harmful dairy products were and how they were so full of hormones and all of these horrid things. And I stopped eating dairy for a number of years. And then I realized that that book was written in the United States. And I talked to some dairy farmers in town and they're like, Renata, it's a completely different world, the American dairy system and the Canadian one. There's no comparison, and our milk is so controlled and inspected that you're getting a very nice milk when you go to the grocery store. So I just wanted to put a plug in there because I was so misled for a lot of years about dairy, and especially Canadian dairy products. One of the other challenges is, like in any business, you have to decide how more automated you're going to become, or less automated. And if the less automated you are, the more you feel like a peasant in the fields doing something that you might have to do if you've been in jail for a long time. We take volunteers on our farm, and that's a comment I get every now and then. Is like, isn't this what people do when they're in a prison farm? They're like, no, this is what I do for fun. This is my hobby and my enjoyment and my income. And that's something we have to balance, is the cost of having volunteers and the cost of having employees versus doing it ourselves and giving up that free time and giving up that income. And it's a huge choice for us to do. We have to look at the market that we have to sell in Thunder Bay. And there's a fantastic market in Thunder Bay for selling local food, and we're really lucky for that. And I think it's gonna be a while before we max that out. But on the other hand, there's a lot of people who feel they can't afford local food. And I'm pretty lucky because I produce a lot of local food, and so we eat a lot of local food because of that. But I know people who, the inconvenience of trying to purchase it, it's a hurdle, and Joseph has done a really great job overcoming that hurdle with the True North Community Co-op. When I have an abundance of food coming off the farm, I can say, Joseph, it's time for a pre-order. Let's get it available and get it out there, and he puts it out there, and then food gets to customers, and I think it's a nice, easy avenue for everybody. I've been really, really happy with that, and there's a number of small grocers in town that are willing to carry it, and I think the CSA, my husband and I have always been a little bit scared of CSAs because I'm not sure why, but it seems scary. But it made it not scary for us to be a part of the CSA with True North Community Co-op, and we were able to supply them with a lot of vegetables over the summer. There was 3 farms that supplied that CSA, and it was a really good experience for me, and I hope that they can keep on doing that. I think you really need to have a clear idea of the lifestyle you want to live as a farmer, and that you need to enjoy the drudgery of it, and enjoy the early sunsets you get to see and the starlit nights that you walk out and start your chores in, because that's when you start chores. And that you don't let it take over your life, and that you still have that balance in your life. And I think everybody struggles with that in whatever life or roads they're taking in their life. But for us, I think that's a really important part, and that Mo and I struggle with regularly. And you just need to check in and make sure that you're doing exactly what you want to be doing. Sometimes I think farming is very idealized. I've had people say, well, you run an organic farm, you shouldn't be feeling haggard and tired and worn out. And I kind of felt like, well, should I be skipping through the field in a little sundress with daisies in my hair? Like, sorry, I have dirty hands, and it's hard to get them clean sometimes. I absolutely love what we do. Mo and I both really love it. We feel really lucky that we've done what we've done, and it's one of those things that kind of just kept growing from buying an old deserted farm that we're going to renovate the house on into where we are now. I think employees are a big struggle for us to decide how much you want to apply. You can have many, many children. But sometimes they need to get farmed out so that they can learn that other people's houses are the same as yours. You need to decide the amount of work you want to do. And I think that that's a big one, is that when I first started, we were working from 7 a.m. and sometimes in the nice long summer days we have here in Thunder Bay, we could work from sun up to sundown, which is, you know, before 7 till 11 o'clock p.m., which is way too long a day. And we've been able to shorten that down so that we're done by supper time, and then we don't keep working unless there's something fun to fix, which usually is most jobs. And I think the last point I want to make is the importance of community in the farming world. And that community involves other farmers, whether or not, and sometimes people say, oh, well, organics is really important, it's the only thing and I said, I feel like no, because every single farmer out there, no matter what they're farming and how they're farming it, is working really, really hard and investing their whole life in producing food, which is not a lifestyle that gets you piles of money and trips to Las Vegas and to Italy. It produces food, and which is a really noble cause. But I think that I lost my train of thought. I did really well till now. But it's really important that we have a strong farming community and very supportive of each other. And in Thunder Bay, we are lucky to have that. You know, of course, there's neighbors who butt heads now and again, but generally our whole community works together. Whether it's farming, the different communities of farming, inter farmers and inter crop kind of relations. It's a nice community here, and it's a nice community. Same with the vendors, like vendors at market or people who are selling through different ways. It really pulls together well. So we're lucky to have that.
Thank you very much. I have two questions or issues. Production of food is the most essential industry. And we are very fortunate to have very nutritious soil, very good soil that was left here by delay. I forgot the name, 11,000 years ago, right? Yes, left deposit is very nutritious. It's a large area, right? So I think we need to brainstorm about how to help our farmers. And I thought that when I grew up, most of the land in Czechoslovakia was owned by the state. The government owned it, and they sent us as students from elementary schools and secondary. They sent us to the fields, and we were helping to pick whatever produce was left there after the combines harvested. And it was a big help to the government, to the industry. I was wondering if something like that can happen here, and how would it happen? Students are looking for jobs. Lots of students now are going to be going more into work that is not going to be paid, like the medical industry is already employing students that are not being paid.
Interns
Thank you, interns.
Or mentorships.
Internships, yeah, thank you. And so couldn't there be something organized, and how would it be organized to get the students out to help?
There are a few programs
Okay.
around that. Some of them, I know there's some mentorship programs in Ontario through different farming organizations. I know through the organic organizations there is one, I can't remember the name of it, but there is a mentorship program. And there isn't, if I could get a few other farms in town to be a part of that, it would work, because generally what you do is you have someone on your farm for 6 weeks or 2 months, and they every few weeks will go have a farm day at one specific farm, and that farmer will cover something, whether it's production of like greenhouse production, or whether it's you know, how to plant garlic or whatever it is. There is those programs in Southern Ontario. In Northern Ontario, it hasn't quite come together. There's been a few other farms that have mentioned it to me. I have volunteers come through. It's called, sorry. Yes, thank you. Willing Workers on Organic Farms. And so they come from all over the world. And they stay for a week to 3 weeks. And that's worked out well. Occasionally I've had to drive a few to the bus stop and say, you're not working out. But most of the times it's worked out really, really well. I hire usually 2 students a summer through a youth employment program. And so their full wage is covered by the program. And I had something interesting told to me this summer by one of the girls that was there, and she said, I think every teenager should come and work on a farm and see how much work goes into producing food, because she didn't realize. And it was great. And I've had a great response from the kids that have come through that program. So, and there was.
We have route to harvest.
Yeah,
Mhm.
yeah, they
We have my son.
from Yes Employment,
My
I
son.
approached them years ago to start that with the Yes Employment. They said they would have to go forward to it. So Roots to Harvest now are hiring, you know, it's their jobs
Mhm.
that they go out to. You get those people. from
They
Roots to
come.
Harvest
They usually
here?
come once or twice in the summer, and they come and do some big project, and I try and make it something really fun. We dismantled a building last year. This year we cleaned garlic.
I'm sure they smelled really good after that.
Oh yeah.
I don't like garlic, so.
And my second issue is that in Southern Ontario, we all know the history of Southern Ontario, where the lands have been taken over, the farms have been taken over by developers. What is going to be putting into place to prevent this from happening here in Canada? That from happening here. Developers are already descending on our beautiful land. What is going to be done to prevent that? We have to exercise.
I'm not sure about that directly, but I know that if you keep moving out of town, there is, like, we bought an old deserted farm, and there's many, many, many more old deserted farms that used to provide food for people and for animals. That's what our farm produced, hay for the horses in the mines that were pulling all the trolleys in the mines. That's what our farm originally did. And it had some dairy production on it too. But there's piles and piles of old deserted farms all around Thunder Bay, but it's a fair bit of investment to get an old farm going again, you know. Go ahead, Peggy, because you probably have some things.
Yeah. Across the province, the provincial government, what I understand is they've made some green areas. You've heard of the green belt, the Niagara Escarpment, those kind of areas. They've made those that developers can't go in and purchase the land for development. And you see the cities, if you drive through those areas on the 401 or such, you'll see that there is built up houses like crazy to there, the field. And you'll know that's where the green belt started, right on that line right there. In Northern Ontario, the provincial government has gone and classified the land throughout the province, and by classifying the land, they have said this land is best for agriculture, this land is not. In the Thunder Bay area, there is no land that's considered grade class 1 agriculture land. So technically, I guess developers could move in and build houses on the agriculture land. Saying that, Thunder Bay isn't growing very quickly. I don't see it happening in the very short term. And the municipalities have some restrictions as well. They've been given some guidelines as to how they're allowed to develop, and the province has mandated that they are supposed to increase the housing in hamlets. And I know in all of those cocoons, I mean, where I'm from, that means they're supposed to concentrate houses and build most houses in Morello, Roslyn, and Hegabec. Those areas, they want more houses. If you go to where I am in more of the farming land, you have restrictions such as you have to have 5 acres with the house and stuff. There are restrictions to it. That's the best explanation I can give you right now. But there is no class 1 agricultural land in Thunder Bay area. It has to do with the climate and the soil types. Those two conditions have to be met to be considered
classroom. We can grow amazing things here, I will tell you that any day, but that is something that there is some concern about. Yes.
Very big concern, that's also because I know that land is being sold around. I talked to the gentleman who is supposed to be wanted. He did so recently he did a survey. He said total percentage of lots of American purchase land there.
Yes.
That's not widely known, and I wonder how much land is being widely purchased around here.
Yeah, it's possible. I'd love to talk to you about it further. There's someone else who has a question, but I'm happy to talk about it with you some more. Yes.
Yeah, I just wondered what you would think as a small farmer, your views on what you would need for support in terms of legislative reform. And I don't know if you're coming tomorrow, we're going to have some of the candidates here. I'm very aware that the Green Party has, I think they have the only policy, Green Party in Ontario, to see they're trying to do legislative reform. That's their concept, is to support small farmers. And even bringing in a whole, like we talked about getting support, connecting with the schools, a whole revised educational curriculum, to do that whole thing, educating the kids and, local food security. So, like from your perspective, I don't know, I don't think there's anything in the other parties, but like from your view, what do you think you would need for legislative reform? Or do you think you need anything to support you as a small farmer growing local food?
That's a huge question.
Yeah, sorry. Well, just general ideas like support, like, it's a huge policy issue, and yet it's not generally addressed in any of the parties, except the Green Party, to my knowledge.
Yeah. Oh, I haven't put a lot of time into that.
Yeah. Well, maybe we can talk about it tomorrow, but I just wanted to throw it out now. Yeah.
Peggy might have more to say there as to
I have lots to
existing.
say on that.
Yeah. No, it's really focused on small farmers, and most of that would be in Southern Ontario.
But small farms too, when you're talking what the government considers a small farm, the government considers me a hobby farm. So even though that's what I do all year round, and our income's not $7,000 a year, it's not 100,000, but it's getting there. But that's the gross, right? The net ends up different. But the it classifies you until you're up in, I don't know what the cutoff is, if it's 250,000 net, or to be considered something larger than a small farm.
I don't know that.
But there's cutoffs as to the income level for the farm as to what you are. And right now I fall into a hobby farmer. So when I read that, I was like, what? But then when Peggy's watched us grow slowly over time, from afar, and Mo and I had these huge ideas of what we wanted to do, and a bunch of them were completely unrealistic, and I think when you come in not understanding the whole farming community, like I didn't grow up on a farm, Mo didn't grow up on a farm, there's a lot of learning we had to do, and if you stop learning, then you obviously close doors, right? So
this kind of classification can actually lead to pushing the small farmers off the land when it comes to development.
I don't think it's going to push them off the land per se. Farming, for Statistics Canada purposes, if you gross $3,000 on your farm, you're considered a farm. In the province of Ontario, you have to gross $7,000 to get a farm business registration number. And that's what they consider the cutoffs, okay? Gross. It's not a huge amount, but it is something. I think what's more critical is not how much your farm is making, but how much as a province the average farm is making. And I think that's pretty interesting. The average farm in Ontario, net, per farm, is $26,000. So how many of you can live as a family off of $26,000 a year? It's pretty tough. The average net revenue income per farm in Northern Ontario is $11,000. So you know how many farmers are part-time, the majority of them. And that's probably the biggest statistic you want to take home. And Renata is right. It's hard to sell food at a high enough price and still get people to buy, because people like to buy cheap food, and for farmers to make a living. We're gonna have time at the end, I think, for more questions. We're gonna let Gigi start, and we'll go from there. Gigi Veeraraghavan, something like that. Veeraraghavan lives and works in Fort Albany First Nation. She has been active in her community, working on a number of health, food, and women's initiatives. Most recently, she helped to establish the Food Security Committee for Fort Albany, which works to address concerns over the availability and affordability of healthy foods, which we were just touching on a little bit there. She is the coordinator of Fort Albany's Healthy Babies, Healthy Children program, and has been involved in setting up and running a farmer's market, a community greenhouse, and a school nutrition program, which offers a full breakfast and healthy snacks to all students attending Peggy School. Please welcome Gigi.
Well, thank you very much. I'm quite impressed. I was one of the presenters who neglected to attach my bio to an email saying that I was attaching my bio, and Peter told me that he got all of this information off of the internet. Yes, I'll have to remember to Google myself. Well, thank you very much for inviting me here. I guess I'll just flip to the next slide. I guess they're in the wrong order. So Wache, that's how we say hello, from Fort Albany. I put together a PowerPoint presentation quickly because I thought it might be nice for you to see some of the things that I'm describing so that you have something to go along with all the work that we've been doing. So I'll just flip back for a second. And Netawi Ketata is Cree for Let Us Grow, and this is the name that we gave to our community-based food security committee that we established in January. Fort Albany is on the James Bay coast. When we talk about food security and sustainable foods, because of our location, it seems obvious to point out that the sustainable foods are from the land. As I suppose everywhere, once upon a time, but now that many people live in urban environments, it's not as easy to get your food off of the land or step out your door and hunt a moose. So I have a picture of old hunting camps. People continue to pick berries and hunt for the goose, the moose, the caribou, and fish. I have a few points that I wanted to cover talking about farming, talking about the history of food security and food sustainability in I guess, this region. So once upon a time, before the world changed, before treaties were signed and peoples were put onto reserves and etc. The Mushkego Cree were a nomadic people, and wherever they set camp, whenever they set camp, they would set a snare at the same time. So they would put up their tent and a snare, and then by the morning they would have caught a rabbit or a partridge or something else that they could eat. So food is always the essential to survival. Hunting wasn't something that you did every day. It was more like you would be aware of where the moose is, and when the time was right and you needed to kill the moose, you would go and get it. Ideally, it's easy as that, right? Farming is not new to Fort Albany, although we're up at 52 degrees north latitude. But it was brought in by the missionaries who came to Fort Albany. In fact, the settlement that is now Fort Albany was originally established or built by the missionaries when they built their residential school. So from what I hear from elders, farming began at the old post when people lived on an island, and then was brought over to the mainland and the island that we live on now. And people believed that they were clearing the land for us. But actually the missionaries were clearing the land and planting fields and fields. Like we had cows and horses and chickens to feed themselves and their mission, as well as the residential school. Not really the community, so the residential school was a little bit apart from the community. My husband, so community members, although they worked in the fields, didn't necessarily eat this produce. And I'll just, like, in some of the projects that we've been working on, some stories are coming out. So my husband, for example, remembers looking in at the window of what the brothers were eating, because they also ate potatoes. But he didn't recognize those potatoes as the same potatoes he was eating in the school. And so actually Renata was just in Fort Albany recently, and I used her expertise as much as I could. So when we were digging those potatoes out of my little garden there, and I said, do you eat these little, the seed of the rotten potato, I guess, basically, that you grew the rest of the potato plant out of? And she said, oh, no, you don't really eat those. Well, my husband had told me that you do eat those because he had eaten those. He had grown up eating these. So anyway, that's just a little bit of background. So our most evident resource, in any case, when it comes to food sustainability, is the land that we live on. And I think one of the things that I wanted to address is that we talk a lot about a connection to land, especially a cultural connection to land and traditional connection to land, but I think practically speaking, we also need to start talking about not you guys, everyone, we need to start talking about the connection to the food that we eat today. So yes, like we may be teaching our younger generations about how to harvest the moose and how to clean fish, but maybe we haven't taught them that peas actually grow from a plant and don't just come in a plastic bag in the freezer, that kind of thing. I decided to hold a community workshop on food security this January. So food security is an issue that many people in the world have been speaking about, and it's certainly something that we experience, but we just didn't really have the name or the title to put to it. I was working with a high school student as my co-op student, and it was one of these projects that I always wanted to get around to and just never had time to, so I assigned her just to read all about the issue. And then I promised her, you know what, we should do a presentation, for your class or something, and you can tell them what you've learned. And out of that I thought, wait a second, the time is right to do something a lot bigger. So yeah, we just put it together like that. I had been invited 2 years before that to NAN, Anishinaabe Nation Food Symposium, the first food symposium for Northern Ontario, and was, really excited by the things that I learned there. I also was invited through my work with NAN to another workshop which worked on asset-based community development, which is really about working with the strengths that exist already in the community, rather than focusing on things that you need. Start from a basis of, what you've got going for you already. And so that was the principle that we used behind the workshop. And I asked Wendy Trylinski, who is my coordinator and who put together the first food symposium, to come along, and Joseph as well, who I met at that symposium. That's a nice poster, huh? Yeah, my husband drew that. But I put in the little fast food graphics. So one of the things, so the first thing that we started talking about at this workshop was we asked all the people who attended to share their ideas of how food insecurity affected them on many levels. We don't have to go through all of these, and I have a feeling that many of these answers would be the same for you here in Thunder Bay. So we looked at the environment, the economy, community concerns, our health, our families, and ourselves. So some of the issues that are at stake out of all of this for us were community wellness, mental health, the ability to know that you can afford to feed your family at the end of the day is an incredible stressor. Well, it is stressful to not know that you can feed your family. We have large families and homes that are, that may house one or two families and grandchildren, and the burden of buying food every day and preparing it often falls on one or two people who are employed. We do have a big welfare. We do have a lot of members who receive social welfare, and a lot of young families who don't necessarily cook from scratch. The prices in our community, because of the transportation costs and business costs, are exorbitant, certainly compared to what you would pay in an urban center. And then we did an analysis of our strengths and weaknesses and opportunities and threats. This is kind of a standard workshop. So our strengths include community. We do a lot of coming together and preparing food for funerals, for occasions, for celebrations. So that's an intergenerational, and we're even cutting up vegetables. We have an excellent student nutrition program that was actually started about 20 years ago, and it feeds a healthy breakfast with 3 of the 4 food groups, as well as an afternoon snack to the entire school, and there are about 150 students from Head Start, which is like a preschool program, up through high school. We have a lot of cultural gatherings. All of our gatherings take place around cultural events, and we eat a lot at these gatherings. Families get together on the weekend in a teepee, and they will roast a goose, and they'll have a stew on, and they'll have a multi-course meal and sit for 8 hours talking and laughing and cooking over an open fire. And we try to put a lot of programming in so that we bring this kind of culture into the classroom and pass on these traditional knowledge. Other existing strengths that were identified were a farmers market that we had been running periodically, in which we would bring food from down south up into our community and sell it at cost. So we would pay the cost of the food, like at the price that they would charge in Timmins, and we would also factor in the cost of freight from Timmins to Fort Albany, but not have any of those other overheads, such as warehousing costs or paying employees, and I don't know what else big business has to pay for, but something's got to account for the way they mark up those prices. So we had those periodically. I think community and family and kinship is a tremendous strength in Fort Albany. And hunting is still one of the main sources of food for certain families, the families that are still interested in it and the families that can afford to go out and do that. And we started to talk about all kinds of options that we could take, what kind of opportunities lay ahead of us that would help us address this problem. Okay, some of the barriers that we face, that we assess that we face, include the transportation and business costs that make a 2.5 kilogram bag of flour cost $14.99 in our store. Other barriers include knowledge and resources and practice. So, for example, just because once upon a time there were farms in Fort Albany run by the missionaries, it doesn't mean that every person has that knowledge or the habit of farming. And as Renata just explained, it's not as easy or romantic as I thought it was. Ways are changing. So whereas once upon a time perhaps fishing would have meant going out and setting a net quite close by, or hunting would have meant walking into the bush with your rifle or shotgun. Now now we have to go out with our big freighter boat and our engines, and that's a lot of startup costs just to own the boat and the engine or the motor, and we have to pay for gas and all of that equipment, and we go out goose hunting in the winter and we need foam mattresses to keep us off the, to keep us comfortable. And so as time has changed, I guess our standards of living or our standards of roughing it have changed as well, and that's added a lot of cost, which means that it's become more difficult for families to go out unless they really make it a priority and plan for it all year round. A lot of our money is spent outside of our community. So we had worked with the federal government's food mail program, where they would, which was a sort of a collaboration between 3 federal ministries, I think. Well, anyway, which reduced the price of shipment of certain foods, of healthy foods, to isolated or remote communities. That food mail program was changed into the Nutrition North program, but nonetheless, it's not everybody who is able to buy from that. So we have one supplier that most people who are able to save the money and have a credit card can purchase from. So they would call up a store in Timmins with a grocery list and ask for these certain items to be shipped to them. So probably once a week, certain people in the community receive food from there, but otherwise most people will do their shopping at the Northern Store. And of course, when the money goes to the Northern Store, it is also going eventually out to Winnipeg and to the shareholders and in the Northern Store, not necessarily staying in our community. I think the largest barrier or challenge that we faced is this legacy of institutionalism or institutionalization that First Nations people continue to try to get beyond. So just the legacy of, I guess, living with welfare and not helping yourself as much as you could, and not perhaps looking at not trying to look for creative solutions all the time. When I first moved to Fort Albany 7 years ago, people would talk about gardens, but in a bitter way, because of what I explained earlier about how the farming was done by the missionaries. And I will say that there's been an amazing kind of change or kind of balancing of the community, and their spirits have been raised and confidence has been raised, not by this project alone, but by a lot of the work that we do in Fort Albany, that has made going and experimenting with gardening something that's interesting and an option that people are looking at, rather than just dismissing and triggering bad feelings. So that's that was quite a significant one. Okay, so we came up with an action plan. We'll just cruise by that because it was very ambitious. don't need to see all that. That was our dream. We talk a little bit about our successes now. So we do have these farmers markets regularly. We purchase our food from suppliers who might supply restaurants or businesses or hospitals. We already have a contact with them because of our excellent student nutrition program. So rather than only feeding the kids, we've decided to use those connections and bring our food up. The way that we've been doing it adds on a cost of about 70 cents per pound. So we have the food shipped from Cochrane to Moosonee by train, and then we'll hire a small plane and bring it up to Fort Albany, and we'll pay the price of that freight plane. And so the farmers markets are extremely popular. I wish I had a picture from one that we did in May where we had it outside our main school, outside our school's sort of circle area, and we had put the food all around the circle on a raised seating area, and we were a little late getting started, which is not uncommon, and so people were lined up like around the rim of this circle with their boxes, just waiting for the countdown to dive at the food. We've started a good food box program as well. The farmers market is something that we're only able to put together once a month because it takes a lot of work and planning and things like that. And a good food box, and the farmers market is literally over in 20 minutes. Like we'll say the starting time is 5 o'clock. People are waiting by 4:45. The doors open, they elbow their way in, and they all rush for the strawberries or they rush for that. And 20 minutes later, all the food has been bought and the room is cleared. So for those people who work until 6, who are, whose child is sick, who are unable to make it to the farmer's market that day of the month, they've really missed out. The Good Food Box is something that offers a different opportunity, so we'll put together 12 items, ideally like meat, well, it's always meat, vegetables, potatoes, onions, milk, juice, the basics that you would need in your household. And sell that for a packaged price. Always, like we're very not for profit. By which I mean we sometimes struggle breaking even as well, but we're working on that. We have cooking classes because while the initial concern that we were addressing was the cost of food. An example that I give often is I complain about paying $7 for a head of broccoli, but the person shopping next to me says, why would I spend $7 on something that I don't even know what to do with it? We do have gardens. We have 8 gardens this year in Fort Albany. Many of them are mainly potato gardens. We have a beautiful greenhouse. This greenhouse had actually been donated to the school from the University of Waterloo about 2 to 3 years ago, and it took us a long time to put it together and to get it planted, but we did all of that work this spring and summer. So you see squash and zucchini, tomatoes. Those tomatoes came from Joseph's Co-op, brought them up for us. Flowers, because actually people really want flowers. Chicken coops. So this was an idea of one of our community members, or our committee members, who just wanted to raise chickens. We went, after forming our committee, we went to a conference in Winnipeg where we met it was a food security conference in Winnipeg, and we met a food security coordinator from northern Manitoba, and he was working with the farmer who had this project of bringing in chickens and training people in how to raise chickens for meat and for eggs. And my colleague just fell in love with the idea, and we decided to bring it to Fort Albany. So we had some exciting days of getting chickens flown in, building chicken coops, and all of that. quite cool. Other successes have been maybe more on the political level and public relations. That's our chief with the Grand Chief of NAN. And they were there. They were in Fort Albany in early September, along with Renata and Joseph, and some other people from the media, so CBC and APTN, and they were interested in looking at what Fort Albany is working on, or what we're doing with this issue. I think some other successes or activities that have come out of our initial planning, or that plan that I glossed over a little bit, have been making presentations such as this. We've also presented to women at women's conferences and with Health Canada. We finally put together a proposal. So the idea for this first proposal was to help individual or community. Am I talking too much? Does that mean 10 more minutes, or? Oh, okay.
10 more minutes till we have to wrap up. But yeah, deliver people.
Okay. I thought I wouldn't have much to say, but so let me just. I'll go quickly. So this proposal is to share the cost of the initial startup. For example, should someone like to have a greenhouse in their own yard, for example me, and many people I know now in Fort Albany are interested in having a greenhouse because we've seen how effective that school greenhouse is. It really does wonders for everything we're growing. So to share the cost of that, as well as any other ideas that people have, that community members have, that will help them become more food secure. So it could be buying a freezer. It could. I would love to learn how to make nets, fish nets, how to tie nets. It's not a. There are all kinds of things that people are interested in, and I think another eventual success will be participating in kind of policy discussions regarding some of the things that affect us as a remote community. So I wanted to touch on partnerships quickly. There's a photo that was taken on that media event day. So you'll recognize Joseph, and that's Wendy Trylinski, the coordinator of my program, which is Healthy Babies, Healthy Children. Just a quick note, I do work full-time with Healthy Babies, Healthy Children, but I incorporated this into my program because of my concerns about people being able to feed their kids, and I really feel that it's taking over. But luckily Wendy seems to work the same way. And Joseph, both in his recent work with NAN, as the coordinator of a new program called Get Growing, which we're participating in, and through True North, has been coming to Fort Albany and really helping us get moving by sharing his ideas and knowledge. The reason I wanted to talk a little bit about partnerships is because I think there are pros and cons to this. I mentioned, well, I think that, and I haven't figured it out completely, but partnerships that include, partnerships with academic institutions, with ministries, etc., they're not always win-win situations for communities, and so I think we're a little bit skeptical about people's intentions when they do want to partner up or write proposals or get grants to work with our community, because sometimes what they're getting out of it, including intellectual property, but also a lot of money and funding and some sort of research that they may be applying everywhere else, but not really with us, just feels like we're not really maybe prepared yet to, we would like to become prepared to deal on an equal basis and discuss these partnerships more. The future. So I mentioned that we have written proposals. I was really keen, and I'm still keen, on starting a co-op in our community with many of the principles that Joseph explained in his initial in his presentation. So actually, I will be attending a workshop in Fort Albany next week that's exploring co-ops that our economic development officer set up. I'll just say like in the last few days, it's occurred to me that we may be jumping a little ahead of ourselves, but anyway, we'll see. I have more to learn. I think another success, our main success has really been in raising awareness. So our our home care department is starting up a Meals on Wheels program for elders. We have local just volunteers, community members who love to cook, who want to start up a community kitchen, kind of / soup kitchen. And they themselves use the term food security when they talk about why they want to do it. We'd like to outreach to more local farmers. I don't mean more in quantity, but more in in distance. And I think ultimately what's at stake here is that we map our own food systems, as Joseph was explaining, and that we have an effect on the land use planning that's going on. And then, my final, I guess the final thing that I wanted to touch on was this question that we started out with in our committee, or that we always have, I suppose, in Fort Albany and possibly everywhere, which is whose responsibility is this really to tackle? I will say that Fort Albany has incredible community spirit, and this is shown by all of the gatherings and the events that we put together. I will say that it's the women who are the leaders in putting all of that, in putting everything together and in participating in events. I think that having fun in these events is important. It's a huge part of it, because it's another excuse to come together. Even when you're elbowing your neighbor aside to get to the strawberries first, you're giggling as you do it, right? So it does fall to individual community members, such as myself and other members of the committee that we formed, to do a lot of the work. I will say that we're all incredibly busy, and so although we have tried to do a lot, I feel like we haven't done so much, but we have these constraints of many other responsibilities. Once upon a time, I think that members of our community would have said, Chief and Council should deal with this, or the ministry should deal with this, or so-and-so. But what I like is actually the way that it's working right now, which is that community members are stepping up to the plate and doing what they can and offering what they are able, not pointing fingers at other people and saying, you should be doing this. And we are receiving the support from our Chief and Council when it's necessary. So let's say if we needed it to sign a grant application, then we've got it. If we need a letter of support or their presence at a media event, they're there. But they're not the ones who are doing all of the groundwork, because they weren't the ones who were, necessarily, who didn't identify themselves as, this isn't the issue they wanted to be personally involved with, which is just fine. I think when we look at the larger context, I do think that that there is responsibility that should be borne by government, by ministries, by Health Canada, etc. And this is that would make for a long discussion. But there. I think I'm done. Thank you very much for your attention. Yeah.
Renata and her question. A few years ago, there was trouble with the potatoes from Prince Island who were rejected by the government. Are you ready to do anything like that? But I realized you've grown tomatoes. I used to run the community garden where I live. I can keep it up this year. But with tomatoes, I was trying to explain to them that tomatoes must be grown into a separate area. And you can't rotate them with any other plants.
Oh, they can. I wouldn't go and my potatoes into my garland.
Yeah, but somebody did, and there was bugs all over the
That was
place.
something else. That was. No, I really don't know anything. I don't know. I don't think that happened with that. That occasionally happens where there's something like that, and you're gonna be fungus or a bug or something that you don't want spread all around. And
Yeah, that's what I was worried about.
that's when they said, oh no, none of these kids can go because of that, because otherwise it'll ruin crops everywhere. Ruin their crops, and it would ruin crops everywhere.
Okay, and then with the peas, you had trouble with deer?
I
We
have
had in our
dogs.
community garden.
I have 2 rotten dogs that take care of the deer.
Oh, you're lucky then.
I was wondering, are you
can't.
concerned for the carbon tax eventually, since you're foresting in order to create agriculture? Because you're not planting a tree for a tree, you're
I
clearing
haven't
land,
taken down any trees
and there's going
to.
to be a carbon tax, so you prepare for that?
Farms are carbon sequesters. So to farmers, it's not a difficult issue. It's not a difficult issue.
Most people in this town still do all their shopping at the local supermarkets, A&P and whatnot. So for Renata, the local economy, do you have access, like, do the local supermarkets buy your food, your produce?
There's a few places that will carry our product. Usually Quality Market will. The smaller grocers like George's Market or Maltese's, those ones will carry local product. And I find the smaller ones like George's or Maltese's will take crops and I have an overabundance of something. That's generally when I'll bring it there, because then I'm going to sell it at a wholesale price, which will do a bit better than cover my cost of growing it. But if I can sell it at the market, then I don't have to pay. I get the full amount rather than them taking half of it.
Right.
So until I can be completely automated, I can't supply a large amount to a grocery store. Someone like Quality Market often wants a continual supply, which I can't do at the level I'm at right now. Brooklyn's Potato Farm has a beautiful, huge storage system, so they can continually supply potatoes all year round. The smaller farmers can't maintain that. Like you need to have an on-farm storage system to continually supply to the local grocers. So that's one of those hurdles that you have to get over, from being a smaller farm like me, very seasonal, to being someone that can supply year-round.
And with that, I think we're going to wind up. You guys are going to be around for a little while afterwards. So if you have further questions, catch them afterwards. Yeah, we're going to leave it at that. I want to say thank you. It's like we have 3 aspects of the food chain, and I didn't know you guys had all been together, but it was neat to see that you go from grower to supplier to teaching them how to use it. It's a great panel. As well, I think what stuck with me is the community spirit you talked about. I mean, cooperative, that's what it's all about. You talked about the sharing of knowledge, and you talked about how people are supporting you in your work. From all levels. And I think that's a wonderful aspect of the food chain that people don't always credit. So thank you for representing the food industry at this forum. I'll pass it on to Peter.
Great. Thank you, Peggy. So I'd like to thank not only these speakers, but all of our speakers and moderators who've been here today. And we heard, tremendous diversity of presentations and perspectives. But the thing that they all have in common is that they're incredibly generous, because all of them took at least a day out of their time to be here. Nobody is being paid or asked for a speaker's fee. So they're all here because they care about developing an economy that is robust and works for us and works for the environment. So thank you very much to all of you as well. A word about immediately after, right now a word about tonight and a word about tomorrow. So immediately after, at 4 o'clock, I think the Environmental Film Network will, if anybody wants to stick around and see the film sans distraction, you're welcome to stay, and I think they will screen it again. Tonight, as I mentioned at the beginning of the day, there are a lot of things going on, and I would like to plug one fantastic event going on in Thunder Bay starting tonight, and that's the Bindigate Film Festival, and it's an Aboriginal film festival. It starts tonight. I think they're having a kickoff gala at 8:30 at the Definitely Superior Gallery. And if anybody knows more detail about that, you're welcome to fill it in terms of what exactly will be happening there, but I've been a couple times and it's really a great festival. And tomorrow, so a number of things will be happening tomorrow. First off, we've talked about three kind of subsectors of the economy today, what might be a green economy someday, but really for that economy to work for us, it has to work for our communities. And our communities have to be ready to embrace environmental and economic change that will come with the realization that we live in a finite world, and the things we were talking about this morning. So tomorrow, that's what our panel is going to be about. It'll be about community resiliency and communities that are ready for change. So that'll be first thing in the morning. We do have the candidates for Thunder Bay Superior North coming at 11 o'clock for a very short debate on the green economy. As you've noticed, there's lots of seats left in this room, so if you want to tell family, friends, anybody about the debate and they'd be interested in coming by, please make sure you do so. Also, we still have a folder up front. I'd like to make sure that everybody gets an equal chance to ask a question of the candidates, because we do have a limited time. So if you want to write your question down and your name on that same piece of paper and put it in the envelope, we'll draw for who gets to ask questions. We'll probably only have a chance to ask 4. So, and then afterwards, I hope you'll stick around. What we'll be doing at the end is, for those who want to be part of bringing all of this together, in a discussion about what the grander integrated green economy we've been talking about might look like, we'll have a very informal roundtable discussion working through the workbook, or if there are other things we want to discuss at that time, we can. And we'll be developing a vision and hopefully some practical suggestions for whoever might be in power after October 4th in terms of things they can do to help bring this green economy to life. So that's tomorrow. I hope you'll all come back, and I'll see you then. Thank you.
Tonight, the festival of the Definitely Superior, I understand that it has to do with Aboriginal culture.